Hard Hat's all about showing up to play hard, doing what it takes to win.
If you want to cement legacy, win another.
He's your third center.
You don't want to pump him up too much, but it's hard not to.
This is maybe the most I've ever agreed with you.
Hey, Buddy Manning here. Welcome to a Tuesday edition of the Garden Report, just a day from the NBA draft. And more activity inevitably coming in Boston and all over the basketball world here. But it started last night. We had a live reacting to it about 11 Eastern when this thing went down, maybe closer to midnight by the time we got going, with Jrue Holiday heading back to Portland, even though he never played a game there. I don't even know if he ever traveled there. Aaron Fentress joining us here, covers the Blazers for the Oregonian. This is crazy how this went down. I don't think anyone thought Portland was a suitor for Holiday. And the fact that these teams 2 years ago made this deal to send Holiday to Boston, and now he's heading to the Blazers, seemingly to play here. Pretty cool full circle moment.
Blazers legend Jrue Holiday. the legendary career of, was it like 36 hours or something like that? Where he was a member of the Blazers in 2023. Yeah, it was a bizarre situation. I had just spent about an hour on the phone that day with someone with the Blazers who did not tip me off at all. I gave him a little bit of grief for that, but he told me later that he actually thought the deal was dead, that it had been being discussed, and then it just resurrected itself in the next several hours. I was actually playing MLB The Show with my son, video game, and pitching a gem, by the way. And all of a sudden, my phone blows up. I'm like, I got the controller. I'm glancing at it. I'm like, wait, what? What? And the Shams bomb, so to speak, announcing that Ant had been traded. And then I saw who, and I just thought, wait a minute, whoa. And all these things are flowing through my mind in terms of why and what this means. And I'll tell you straight up right now, if you want to know why I think Portland did this, the number one reason, they need to win next season. I'm of the firm belief that GM Joe Cronin and Coach Chauncey Billups need to get above 500 at least to show progress, because a new owner is coming. The team's up for sale. And we all know the history of sports. When a new regime of any type takes over, they tend to eventually bring in their own people. So why is a new owner going to want to keep GM or the head coach, what have you, if you have a fifth consecutive losing season? And they had a good second half last season, going 23-18. They made some definite strides. Denny Avdia came around. Tumani Kamara was on the all defensive team. Scoot Henderson showed promise. Shaden Sharp, Donovan Clingan. And so it's time to take another step, and you do that with veteran guys. And the Blazers did not have one guy on their roster who'd ever even been an all-star. Well, now they do. And granted, he's 35 in Holiday, but he's an elite defender. He can shoot, he can score, he can lead, he can do all sorts of things that they need to try and take the next step next season.
Yeah, and I do want to talk a little bit about Holiday's fit in Portland because, again, didn't anticipate it. But now that it happened, I like it. I think there's a lot of reasons that this could work for them. But let's get into why they did it here and how this thing came together. Obviously, on the Boston side of things, I think everyone expected Holiday to move this summer. So over the last 48 hours here leading up to the draft, I don't think anyone suspected that it'd be a quiet time for them. And I think once it happened, nobody was blown away by the fact that they did this. Maybe the trade partner and the return surprised people a little bit. But Holiday was probably going to be the most likely Celtic to depart this summer, most importantly because of the fact that he's on a 3-year deal that's going to pay him $100 million here through age 37. So I think although they moved with some real urgency to trade him this summer, they weren't going to attach draft picks to him or, incentivize one of these teams that are just taking on contracts to do so. They want to find someone who really valued him and wanted him. And it seems like there were a number of teams that did that. And this probably was the best offer that they could find here. Now, from Portland's perspective, you mentioned the great start or great finish to last year. They're definitely in a decent spot to take a step toward winning. And I think your ownership point was great there. Obviously, no one could have predicted that they'd make this move specifically. But did you go into the summer saying, all right, this is going to be a team that acts with some urgency to improve its roster and make some kind of big move here?
So the feeling coming out of the season before we knew that the Paul Allen estate was going to put the team up for sale was that, moves needed to be made. And Cronin, the GM, and Billups, the head coach, made the point that, it's time to take the next step, that the development phase was over in terms of where you were going to make roster decisions and playing time decisions and lineup decisions based on developing. So losing is acceptable because you're trying to develop. That kind of ended when they won 10 out of 11 to get back into the play-in hunt and then finished, like I said, 23 and 18 in the second half of the season. So now you're in a position where, okay, you got to build upon that. But everyone who covers the team, and in my conversations with people within the organization, was that you're looking to make moves in terms of taking someone like Simons, who is kind of redundant with Scoot and with Shaedon Sharpe, or Jeremy Grant. Now that you got Kamara and Denny, or maybe DeAndre Ayton because you got Klingon, and moving them for either picks or younger players to add to the already young mix. Right? That seemed like the avenue to go, which is what they did last year on the draft day when they traded for Denny. Like, they traded 2 picks and Malcolm Brogdon, who used to play for you guys, who came over in the trade for Holiday. They traded him and 2 picks to Washington for Denny, a 24-year-old. So you would think that those types of things might happen. But once everything shifted with the new ownership, then it became, okay, well, wait a minute. Again, this is my personal opinion. The people I've talked to have kind of denied that this is a thing in terms of feeling a sense of urgency. But I think this move proves it, that, okay, now you got to go out and get some win now cats right away to try and make an impression, because everything's up in the air when you have a new owner. And so otherwise, why do you move Simons, who has 1 year left at $27 million, for a 35-year-old who has 3 years left at $104 million? I mean, you're already trying to get rid of Jeremy Grant's contract. He has 3 years left at about $100 million, right? Ayton's making $35 million. So it just doesn't make any sense unless you're thinking we need some veteran guys here who can help us win now. So that's why I believe wholeheartedly that that's why they did this. Otherwise, it makes no sense. And there are fans out there who are freaking out. They're like, what are we doing? We have a young nucleus. We should be getting guys 24, 25, 26, 27, not a guy 35 and with that much money. But this is why you would do it, because that guy can come in next year and help you win.
Yeah, and they're quietly expensive between Ayton and some of the other deals here. The younger guys still haven't gone on to their extensions yet, so there is some balance here. They're a little, as I look at it, tight up against the second apron, which you probably don't want to cross if you're most teams. So they're in a decent spot financially here to make a move like this. Now, how does this look in 2028 when he's 37 and there's a $37 million option that year? That's going to be less of a percentage of the cap. So I think people see those numbers and they get freaked out. So I don't think it's awful by that point. It's not a number Boston could carry forward alongside their super max deals and all that. So I think the money probably fits for Portland. Again, we'll see what trajectory his career takes here. I think in a vacuum, without money being any of an issue, no Celtics fan would want to see this guy go here. He was still effective last year. I don't think the defense slipped much at all. The offense did. He went from just out of this world from 3 the first year in Boston to sliding a little bit and teams ignoring him and all that. So I think the offensive fit is an interesting question here. But what I like about it is if he went to Dallas, he's suddenly their point guard while Kyrie Irving's out. If he goes to the Clippers, he's probably their point guard. And he has to do all the creation and all that other stuff. On this team, I would assume that they want Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe and some of their other primary younger players to do that, while Holiday's catching and shooting threes, filling in a little bit with some of the ball handling responsibilities like he did in Boston. But I don't think offensively, at least, they're going to put a ton of pressure on him here. In fact, I wonder if he's going to start or come off the bench for this team.
So I would be floored if he didn't start. And to me, the only way he doesn't start is if he gets beaten out by both of those guys, Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson. And I just don't believe that. I mean, I've watched these guys since they come into the league, and not one of them did one thing last year that makes me believe that they're ready to start for a postseason team. They're so young and inconsistent. Sharpe will be into his 4th season, but this guy didn't play in college. He missed 50 games 2 seasons ago. His shooting from 3 has just been abysmal the last 2 seasons. He's super athletic. He's sometimes aloof on defense, which got him benched, at least taken out of the starting lineup. And Scoot had a 6-week stretch where I was calling him Scoot Curry because he was shooting 44% from 3-point range. It was crazy because he went from like the first half of the season, he shot like, or first 30 something games, he shot like 29% from 3. Then he went off like I was shooting like 44, 45 for like 6 weeks. And then he went right back to about 30. So he's wildly inconsistent. So, to me, Holiday comes in and it's a battle between those two to see which one starts next to him. If it's Scoot's running the point with Holiday taking some, on-ball responsibilities, but also playing basically the 2. And then if Sharps beats out Scoot, then Sharps playing the 2 alongside Holiday. Or it's also possible if Jeremy Grant returns that they go with 3 forwards like they did part of last season, where you have Grant, Toumani Camara, and Denny starting with a point guard. And last year they did that with Simons. This time they could do it with Holiday. But Holiday's the adult in the room, man. He's the 2-time All-Star. He's the 6-time All-Defensive team guy. He's going to be a guy who most resembles what Chauncey Billups was as a player when he played for Detroit and won a title with them 20-something years ago. So I would be absolutely flabbergasted if he weren't starting. Also, to me, if you don't think he's good enough to start for you, then why are you doing this? Like, why are you bringing in 3 years, $104 million if you don't think he's better than Scoot Henderson?
Yeah, and he's probably a guy who needs some load management at this point and will miss some time. He did last year. He didn't hit the all defensive threshold number of 65 games there. So that ended his streak there and will probably continue at this point in his career. So that'll be opportunities for other guys to play there.
Right. Well, exactly. There's 96 minutes available at the guard position. So if those are your 3 guards, they all can average 32. And then we also know injuries are going to happen. Like you said, load management with him. He can start, and it doesn't mean he has to play 38 minutes, right? He can start and play 33, 32. Also, Matisse Thybulle just exercised his option. He's back. He's a really good defensive guard who shot 43% from 3 last season, albeit in just 15 games, but he's going to warrant some minutes. So there's going to be a lot of different things they can do, but I'm thinking of a defensive, 5 unit out there of Holiday, Matisse Thybulle, Kamara, Denny, and Klingon. I mean, if you play that team the entire season as your starting 5, you're not going to score a ton of points, but you're going to lead the league in defensive rating, I believe. So that's going to be a very nice unit for Chauncey to be able to turn to. So I personally believe Holiday starts. I don't think he plays 38 minutes, 36 even, but I think he's got to be your focal point as a leader on this team. Otherwise, I see no point in doing this at all.
Yeah, for sure. And I love the defensive potential here. We saw it late last season, last 15 games, they're 8th in defensive rating, and they just got better on that end of the floor, bringing in a guy like this. So I want to talk about the Boston side of things, but first want to give a shout out to our sponsor here, Prize Picks. And even though basketball playoffs are over and hockey's done as well, still a ton of great sports going on, namely baseball, women's basketball right now as well. You got Caitlin Clark playing and all the other stars over on that side of things. There'll be a women's team in Portland soon as well. But all the stars are out. Shohei Ohtani, Aaron Judge, you name them, you can put them on your daily fantasy sports team and just pick more or less at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks, and they've made daily fantasy sports easy. They got mixing, matching of player projections, even from different sports. So you can combine different players from different leagues with your predictions for how many hits they'll get, or home runs, or points, or assists, whatever it might be there. You get the flex play, which means you can still cash out even if your lineup isn't perfect. And tonight, it is Taco Tuesday with this player projections on those, projection stat output projections. Usually by like 15 to 25%. So all kinds of great promos going on over there all the time. And when you get started for the first time here, download the app, use CLNS, get 50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS, get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. You don't even need a win to get the bonus there. So go check it out. Again, use the code CLNS to let them know we sent you. Prize Picks, run your game. So from Boston's perspective, I think more questions here actually than Portland, which is interesting. They're bringing in Anfernee Simons for now, and I wouldn't be stunned if a day from now we're talking about Simons going elsewhere, but we'll see. I think it's all going to depend on what's out there.
For that matter, the same thing with Holiday. I mean, they could easily.
I was going to ask you that, but
let's go with Simons first. We can come back to that if you want. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked. Like if Miami wants him, someone can go back to that Miami trade that never happened with Dame, right? But I mean, you have to wonder: does Holiday want to come to Portland? Does he want to go from playing with Giannis and then Tatum and Brown to playing with a bunch of kids at 35? I don't know.
It's interesting, right? Because this thing probably came together, and you mentioned you know, someone you talked to thought this thing was dead. So I don't know how much Holiday's been involved in this conversation. I think there's been some open dialogue from Stevens in particular that anything could happen this summer,
Right.
but I'm not necessarily sure if they went to Holiday and said, "Oh, how do you feel about Portland?" Because yeah, that's a long move for him and his family. He's got a pretty big family at this point. He's been here for a couple of years. And then the state of the team, as you mentioned, at this point in his career, because this is going to be the last team he plays for. Maybe he wants to compete for a championship. And they can definitely make the playoffs this year, but there aren't championship aspirations. Yeah. What have you heard in terms of the likelihood Holiday does actually play for Portland?
I was told that the plan is to keep him, that they want him to come in and help, and that there's not necessarily a plan in place that they're going to flip him like that. Like last time. Last time it was a given because it was, you know, it was like we talked about. They were young. They were trying to go young post Dame. You weren't going to move Dame for Holiday. And I was like, wait, why would you do that? So they flipped him right away to Boston. But now I think it's a little different because they need guys like that, like I said. But again, if someone comes along with a good deal, right, then you would take it. And if Holiday, you know, makes any type of rumblings about, hey, I don't want to be there, I don't want to do this, then maybe that forces Portland's hand. I don't know. But I was told that the plan in place was to bring him in to help them.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the most likely outcome here. Now, on the Boston side of things, I think it all comes down to what's out there, what they could potentially get back for any number of these players, and a lot of Kristaps Porzingis reporting today. Sam Hauser, I think, a given on a $10 million deal that a lot of teams would like to have, and a player that would help most teams. I think there's a strong likelihood he could move on here if they could get something for him. And then the Simons, what's his value? What can teams get back for him? The interesting thing here is I don't know if the Blazers were actively shopping him for some amount of time, but if this is the deal they came to with him, where, yes, this is a player they really like coming back in Holiday, but they're giving up 2 seconds. They're not getting a ton back here in terms of long-term, you know, sustainable assets.
Right.
Does that mean there wasn't a strong market for Simons? You know, is this a guy that they've looked to move before? And I'd have to imagine that would carry right over to Boston, where even though he's on an expiring contract right now, which changes the conversation a little bit, is this a guy that you're going to get a ton back for, or is this a guy that you're going to get maybe 2 smaller salaries back for and just keep inching toward that second apron line if you're Boston now? My gut tells me, just looking at him and his productivity and his game and how he fits on this roster, maybe he starts the year here, but this doesn't seem like a building block kind of player for Boston, just off my first impression of it.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I don't know. I mean, he's been in kind of such a weird position because they traded CJ 3 years ago, CJ McCollum, to quote unquote clear a runway for Ant, and then Ant was playing next to Dame, and that didn't work. There's the two, you know, 6'2", 6'3", basically combo guards. I'll go Dame is more of a point than Simons, who don't play defense, wasn't working. And then they moved Dame, but then they drafted Scoot. So now Ant was still being challenged by another point guard. And then, oh, by the way, before that, they drafted Sharp, who plays the 2. So it's like they cleared a runway by trading CJ. They ultimately trade Dame, but in the process, they drafted 2 other guards to kind of push Ant. And Ant's just not a point guard. Ant is a lead guard, a score first kind of guy. Give me the ball, I'll go make things happen. And they tried to make him a point, and he just couldn't adjust. So I don't know how much overall value he would have across the league, other than a team looking at him as a guy who's just a flat out scorer. And I remember years ago, someone with the Blazers, and this is back, I've been a big Ant guy since they drafted him. I thought it was a great pick at 24, getting a kid who, had he gone to Louisville instead of just coming out of IMG Academy, could have been a lottery pick the next year. But someone said to me like 5 or 6 years ago that he sees Ant as a Lou Williams kind of guy. Remember Lou Williams, who came off the bench, was a great 6th man, just an instant offense kind of guy. And of course, I'm thinking, no, he's more like a Steve Francis. He's going to be a future all-star or what have you. He hasn't reached that level. But Lou Williams, you know, that kind of works for a team that may need some offense, because Jason Tatum might miss the entire season or most of it. And so if you plug him into what you guys do, which is not you guys, but what the Celtics do in terms of leading the league with 48 threes per game, which I'm an OG, get off my lawn, I'm gonna yell at clouds. I hate that kind of basketball, to be honest with you. I grew up on 80s and 90s basketball where when a team shot a three, it was like a big deal. Larry Bird averaged 1.9 threes per game when he was playing, but that's just the state of the world we're in right now. But Anfernee Simons, that's what he does. He played his best basketball playing with Terry Stotts in a system that was designed to get perimeter shots for Dame, CJ, Norman Powell when they traded for him, and himself. And that's where he thrived in that system. And then even early Chauncey, he was doing some of that. He had a stretch 2 years ago where he hurt his finger, missed 18 games, came back, and then was killing it. He was averaging 26, 27 a game. I had him on my fantasy team. I was loving it. He got sick, got hurt. That kind of depleted him. But that was Ant in score now, go do what I do mode. Then when they shifted him to try to be more of a distributor point guard first, his scoring came down a bit, but it was always a situation where anytime he wanted to, and he went back to that mode, he could turn it on. So in Boston's system, where they're trying to get threes for all these shooters, he's going to thrive in that because he will be as good a shooter as pretty much everyone on the team, but he's also way more athletic and able to get to the rim and break down people than Pritchard, than White. Not Jalen, of course, but he's got Hauser. So he's going to be a guy who, you get him open for threes. Someone flies out at him. He can go right them, go down the lane. He can dunk on people. He's just such a spectacularly gifted athlete. So I think he fits perfectly, especially with Tatum out. I think he can bring enough offense to help them, maintain themselves as probably a 50-win team at least. I don't know how people are feeling about what's going to happen next season without Tatum, but I think he changes probably the doomsday scenario of not having Tatum for a while, and then maybe Tatum comes back in March or April, and then they ride into the playoffs with him. But I love this fit for Boston, 100%.
Yeah, and I've heard that reaction to this, that this could help alleviate the offensive firepower they're missing without Tatum, replace some of it rather. And I think it's good, especially for Jalen, who's stepping into, and I still expect Jalen to be here. We'll see what happens. I know Shams was talking. There's a lot of offers for him right now. This thing could go in a million different directions this summer.
That would be so sad. Again, old school, get off my lawn, but you see my Chicago Bears helmet back there, big Walter Payton fan. So Walter Payton's son helmet. I'm a Bulls guy. Them breaking up Brown and Tatum would have been like had the Bulls had to break up Pippen and Jordan. Do you remember a few years ago when they lost to Miami and Perkins was running around saying they should break up Brown and Tatum? And I was beside myself, like, what are you talking about? They were 26, 25. You're going to break these two up? And I get it, the money, right? They're both $300 million guys. How do you keep that? But I would be sad, and even I'm not a Celtics fan, but I want to see those two play together. But you're telling me that there's a possibility they could split them up?
Definitely, because I think
so
they're going to play the value game this summer. So if the easiest way for them to shed money is to just trade Hauser for nothing, or Porzingis, and you're giving up a pick there just to move off that, or whatever those other possibilities might be to move off money, that's not great for team building. If there's a trade where you're getting a top 10 pick and 3-4 other picks down the line that are premium selections and a young player, and just, starting to imagine some of the things you could get back for Jalen there. I'm opposed to it generally too. And I started covering this team in 2021, and the whole conversation from that point right through the championship and even now has just somehow continued to be, Brown and Tatum going to continue to play with each other. I think just having those two together gives you a baseline of competitiveness. And I think this is how Brad Stevens has felt for a lot of this time, that as long as you have those two, you can figure out everything else around it. And that's why they signed them both to Supermaxes. That's why they kept them together through some tough times. And I think they'd like to keep them together into the future now, but they're not going to be together for some amount of time here because Tatum's down. And, once you get to the other side of that, how much of the rest of the roster is left at that point, with all the tax hits and penalties and all the other stuff they're going to have to deal with here. Even if Brown and Tatum are playing at a high level, if it's just those two, I don't know how great of a chance you have to win a championship. So I think that's why you consider everything right now. But I'd start next year with Jalen at the very least. I don't think you do it now. I think there's other opportunities potentially down the line to do that. But you have to explore every option if you're them. So that brings me back to Simons here. Fitting in with these guys, I think Jalen's going to need, just to keep this team above water, Derek White, Simons, even Porzingis, I wouldn't hate them keeping around at least to start the year. And how much of this stuff can you actually do in season is a good question. But if they're going to try to remain competitive this year, and I think that's the best mindset to go into this year with, in a weaker East with some other teams dealing with injuries, with no clear favorite, I think that's the best route for this team, at least to start going forward. And if things go sideways, other guys get hurt. Remember that year Golden State had a couple years ago where Clay's out and then Curry goes down pretty soon to start that year. And then it just becomes very clear, all right, we're taking a step back this year and going into the lottery and all that. I think that's the route the Celtics team should take. So I am keeping Jalen around. As far as Simons goes, what do you think is his role on this roster? You know, just as it looks right now, if we're assuming everything they have right now is going to be there, like, is he a starter? Is he coming off the bench and just being a microwave guy with the ball in his hands? Is he playing off ball next to Jalen? Like, where do you think he fits in on this roster?
Oh, I could see him starting. I could see him, playing that combo guard role where he sees some point, plays some off ball, and I could also see him coming off the bench. I mean, I guess
the trade-offs him and Pritchard.
Right. I was going to say, I guess it comes down to, which one of those guys do you want to start? Which one do you want to come off the bench? I covered Pritchard, by the way, at Oregon. I covered when they went to the Final Four, and I've written about him numerous times. But I think because of Anfernee's athleticism, I think he's probably better than Pritchard. But you could make the argument that maybe having that firepower with the athleticism coming off the bench is a better fit. But I think he's definitely in the top 5 on that roster. But again, he's just not a point guard. So, I mean, can Derek White handle those duties enough to?
I think Jalen has the ball in his hands most of the time. You'll get some sets where Derek's going to run some stuff. And then if Horford's back, like, he can do some secondary create. It's just going to be a team effort, I think, to replace what was the Jason show, effectively running the offense. So, it's going to be an adjustment for all of them. And I do love the idea of Jalen having some other guys he can lean on in those spots because, everyone's joked about it forever. And he's gotten a lot of crap for the turnovers and the left hand and whatever with Jalen. He's come a long way with the facilitating. But now everything's on you, right? You're getting all the double teams. You're getting all the attention. Like, to bring back the Lillard CJ conversation you were having there, like, when Lillard's out for a game, it's a whole different game for CJ at that point in time. And, whatever other comparisons you want to make, like, it's just a different season. And the big thing with Jalen now and for this team is you have to do it every night, right? Like, you can't have an off night if you're Jalen now because you're going to lose. Jason's not going to be there to take the pressure off you. All the pressure is going to be on you every night. And that's the question, I think, for them and for other teams that might be interested in a guy like Jalen. Is he the kind of guy who can lead a team? Like, is he the kind of guy who can push you deep into the playoffs as your number one option? He's done it in spots. He's done it in flashes. Even that game 5 against New York, where after Tatum went down, it was maybe the best game of his career. But then the next night, a couple of nights later in New York, it was like 6, 7, 8 turnovers, and they got blown off the court 10 the season there. So it's interesting. Like, there is a case to keeping this thing together and trying to compete as much as possible. And then there's a case to trying to take that step back now so you can take a step forward once Tatum gets back as soon as possible. And it's just such a hard decision to make at this point in time because you really don't know where this is going with Tatum. You really don't know where this roster could go if you just leave it together right now. And the roster is just so expensive that you're not going to realistically, I think right now they're 190 in tax after that Holiday deal. So, I don't know.
Yeah,
if you're them, which direction are you going?
Well, some of the best basketball Ant would play would be when he would have the opportunity to either be off ball with Denny, maybe running some point or point forward, or Scoot running the point where he can go back to being more of a 2-guard mentality, which is where he thrived when he played his best ball with Dame. The problem with them is that they were trying to like split the roles. And so then Anthony really struggled about, okay, my point guard and my 2-guard and my point guard. But when he was just the lead guard and just do what you want to do, that's when he thrived. And so if he can be in a situation where he doesn't have to have a lot of point guard responsibilities or worry about anyone else getting their shot. There were so many games last year, it would drive me bananas where he would have 0 points or 2 in the first quarter. He's your best player. He's your leading scorer. And he has 0 or 2 points because he's trying to think the game more and get everyone involved. He's not just reacting and using his gifts. So if not you guys, if Boston puts him in a position where he can be that kid again, I'm telling you, man, he is a legitimate 26, 27 a night score with pretty damn good efficiency when he's just doing those things. I'll take you back to the year Damian had core muscle surgery and they traded CJ. There was a stretch from January 3rd until they shut him down in March, where when he and Nurkic played together, they went 12-12. That doesn't sound impressive, but that's 12-12 with Nasir Little, with a little Norman Powell before he got traded, a little CJ before he got traded, and some other guys who aren't even in the league anymore. Right. Dame was gone. And they went 12-12 with Ant averaging 25, 6, and 5 and shooting 47% and 40 from 3 or something like that. He was amazing. And that was a situation where there was nothing to lose. Just go out and be yourself and play. And he went nuts. But then it was in more of a structure situation where he had to think more and what do I do with Dame? And then the whole thing was Scoot. It just impacted him. So if he can just come there and just be himself, I'm not saying be a ball hog, right? I'm not saying give him the ball. He does whatever he wants to. But if he's in a situation where he's working off of Brown, working off of White, I'm telling you, man, he's going to put up some nice numbers. He's going to shoot close to 40 from 3, which I know you guys will love, shooting 53s a game. And he's going to be able to get to the rack and create things too, because he's so athletic, gifted. Remember, he won a dunk contest. It was arguably the worst dunk contest ever, but he won it.
I don't even remember it
because he's got a 40-inch vertical or plus. So yeah, I would be shocked if he doesn't thrive, especially if you have a situation where White can play some point, Pritchard can play it, Brown can play point forward or just play the point, because he's kind of a 2 and a 3 anyway, right? So then yeah, I think that's perfect for Simons. Just don't make him the point guard, and I think he'll be great.
I want to talk a little bit more about Simons before we wrap this up here, and maybe we'll get some more news later tonight. Wanted to shout out real quick LinkedIn. And right now over at LinkedIn, as a small business owner, you can't have the luxury of clocking out early. Your business is on your mind 24/7. So when you're hiring, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. And that hiring partner is LinkedIn Jobs. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates that you can manage all in one place. LinkedIn's new feature helps you post your job, write job descriptions, and then quickly get your job out to the right people with deep candidate insights. Either post your job for free or pay to promote. Promoted jobs get 3 times more qualified candidates. At the end of the day, the most important thing is your small business getting the quality of candidates. And with LinkedIn, you can feel confident you're getting the best based on LinkedIn's data. 72% of small businesses using LinkedIn say that LinkedIn helped them find high quality candidates. You can let your network know you're hiring, even add a hiring frame to your profile picture to get twice the qualified candidates. So find out why more than 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring today. Find your next great hire on LinkedIn by going to linkedin.com/garden to post your job for free. That's linkedin.com/garden to post your job for free. GARDEN, linkedin.com/garden. Terms and conditions apply. So I looked at some of the numbers last night just from this last season, and I think we know the story with Simons to some degree here is great offense. And in terms of the pick and roll, 7 a game last season, 0.99 points per possession, which was in the 79th percentile, a great number in terms of the creation there. Spotting up, 112 in the 69th percentile. And we know he can shoot lights out, probably even better than he shot last year. So those are the 2 real skills the Celtics could take advantage of alongside all the other offensive talents they have here. But as much as you talked about...
One other point, he got blitzed a lot. The teams knew he was the guy, and he was on the ball a lot. They would just blitz him and take him out of things. So that's another thing that's going to help him in a situation where with Boston, where you can't do that because there's just too many shooters, and you got Jalen on the floor. So anyway, go ahead.
And that helps those guys in turn. But as much as you talked about the threes, and that's true, and the offensive system they run and how he fits into that, I think that's all true. This is also a team that really values defense.
I know. That's the problem.
They don't love having guys out there that teams can attack. They try to minimize that as much as possible. The guys who can get attacked haven't played a ton under Joe Mazzulla. So I'm looking at these numbers from last year, and in isolation, gave up 1 point per possession, 30th percentile, 108 against the pick and roll, 6th percentile, and overall opponents shot 50.6% against them last year, which was the worst of any of their regular contributors. This is a good defensive team down the stretch of the season. They still lost his minutes by 2.5 points per 100, even though they won all those minutes by 1.7, I believe. So this is a team that didn't fare great in his minutes just because of the defensive weaknesses there. Now, is there a competitiveness that those numbers don't show, or is this just a guy you're going to have to try to hide on that end of the floor?
You know, he has gotten better, which just means that those numbers you're talking about have been worse, right? Chauncey really challenged him this last season and just told him, dude, you have to defend. Like, this isn't optional, right? It isn't, oh, if you score 26, 27 a night, you don't have to defend. That doesn't help us. You have to defend. And so he made some strides in that area, but it's not a strength of his. It's just not. Now, could Boston's culture change that? Because remember, he came to Portland when under Stotts, they were not playing great defense, and you had Dame and CJ who weren't great defensive guards either, right? So you kind of were in that mindset, in that culture that he kind of had to come out of. So maybe going to Boston, where, like you said, they don't really mess around with that. You need to be a guy who at least isn't getting torched. Maybe that takes him to a different level. But yeah, that very easily could be a problem where the only solution is that he outplays that problem on the offensive end. Or he just elevates his play on the defensive end in order to be on the court more often. But yeah, that's, like I said, I'm a big Ant guy, but that's sort of the kryptonite right there, where he can be a liability on defense. There's just no doubt about that. And so Boston's gonna have to make a decision there in terms of how much rope they give him to be that liability if they're getting the offense, or maybe they get him to take another step in that area.
So long wingspan, like to hear that, the athleticism you mentioned. So there's some stuff to work with there potentially if the Celtics can either hide him or maybe help him improve in that spot, because they've turned some defenders into better players on that end of the floor. Pritchard has come miles and miles from where he started his career. And, I'd call him a plus defender at this point, despite his size. So, Pritchard might start in that case if they want to have their stronger defenders on the court for more of the time. And Simons, I could see being a second unit guy in that case. Again, if they keep him here. Now, if he does end up coming to Boston, what was this guy like to cover? Any good stories, memories you have of just watching this guy grow throughout his career in Portland?
Oh yeah. So I didn't cover the team until the 2020 bubble. So he'd already been in the league a few years, but I helped out here and there with some coverage. So, I watched him a little bit early on, but he came in super shy. Didn't say much, which 19-year-old kid out of the IMG Academy, you're like, what do you have to say? And over the years, he's just become more and more vocal. He has not developed into necessarily a vocal team leader, and that's something the Blazers have really lacked since moving Damian, as someone who can be that guy. And maybe Denny Avdia would be that guy moving forward, and maybe Scoot, but Ant never really sees that role. But in terms of covering him and dealing with him from a media standpoint, great kid, great guy to talk to, very personable, smiles a lot. He even when he's having a bad stretch, he's not surly. He's still respectful and will talk. He had his worst game forever when he scored 0 points one night, I think against the Clippers, and he didn't talk that night. He kind of disappeared. But the next time we saw him, I brought it up, and he talked about it, and he was cool about it. And that's probably the most negative situation I've ever seen him in, really. But no, I think the media out there will like him because he's just a personable young man. Like, he's a good kid with a good family, great family. He's got his head on his shoulders, so he'll be good for everyone to cover. Well, things are heating up. I'm already seeing the report from Mark Stein, Celtics and Hawks maybe working on a Porzingis deal potentially here. Wow, just breaking it up. Hawks have emerged as a serious trade suitor for Boston's Kristaps Porzingis. That to me says something's happening there. A report like that, so makes sense. We will monitor that. Although before we let you go, Aaron, it wouldn't be a Blazers reporter on a Celtics podcast without checking in on Robert Williams, who is beloved here. And Big Rob only has played 26 games, I believe, through his first 2 years out there. Underwent surgery, I believe, right at the beginning of the offseason.
million procedures at this point, it feels like, for him, and just has struggled immensely to stay on the floor. Is there hope for a turnaround with him this year, the last year on his contract?
I mean, there's hope, but it just reached the point. He's only been here 2 seasons, but it's reached the point where you're just waiting for the next thing to happen. It just seems like there's always something with him, and it's depressing if you're a Blazers fan, because when he plays, my God, he's so dynamic. His sudden explosion to go up and block shots or disrupt shots or get rebounds, what have you, and he's just and lobs. He's just so fun to watch. And I remember watching him in the finals, when the playoffs, before Boston lost to Golden State. I thought, wow, that kid's pretty darn good. And he got hurt, I think, in the postseason at some point. I think maybe in the finals, right? Did he get hurt early in the finals against Golden State?
He tore his meniscus that March. Came back for the playoffs, played through it, in the pain and swelling and all that just got worse and worse as it went on. And by the finals, he could barely play. Yeah. But when he was acquired, people were so excited because, like, hey, we got Blazers fans saying we got a still relatively young, athletic big who can play defense, because the defense has been such a problem here. You add him in there, boom, your defense is going to be better. Even as a backup, it's just giving you 20, 22 minutes. It makes your defense better. And even this year, you saw flashes of that, but he just couldn't quite stay healthy. He was optimistic at the end of the season, believing that he can now, because last year he was preparing for the season while still getting over the knee surgery he had. And now that he's past that, he believes now he can work on all parts of his body, right? And come in better shape without having to lean on working on one specific thing. So he was hopeful coming out of it. But great guy to cover. Another guy who was fun to talk to, even despite what he was going through, was always fun to deal with here. But yes, he's just someone you kind of feel badly for, because what he can bring to the court, and he's not being able to do it because of his body. So that kind of sucks to watch. Aaron, it was great talking to you. Appreciate you stopping by here. Everybody can follow your coverage over at the Oregonian and Aaron J. Fentress on Twitter.
OregonLive.com. I actually, if you search Anfernee Simons, my name, in OregonLive.com, I did a 3-part feature on him 3 years ago. I went deep. I talked to his childhood friends. It was it was pretty crazy. But if you want to read a lot about the kid, you can find that feature from, I think, 2022. I think. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm going to check that out because I'm interested in his, especially the college thing. He didn't attend Louisville, right? And just spent the year at IMG, and interesting path to the NBA in that sense. And again, really talented player. We'll see if he ends up in Boston here. Something else happens. Of course, some Porzingis rumors percolating right here. We'll stay live for a minute and touch on those while I'm here. But appreciate you stopping by again.
Okay.
And, great to meet you.
You too, man. Take care.
All right. So let's get into this Porzingis stuff briefly here, because I don't think we have a ton of information to go off at the moment, but this thing could happen at any time here. To me, and this is the tweet we have that we're looking at here from Mark Stein. He says, Atlanta Hawks have emerged as a serious trade suitor for Boston's Kristaps Porzingis, league sources tell him and Jake Fisher. San Antonio reported from Fisher interest in Porzingis as well. So maybe a little bit of a bidding war between some teams right now that have some interest in him. Again, as bad as it was for him in the playoffs, and as rarely available as he sometimes is, this is a good player. And on an expiring deal, that's valuable to teams that want to have good options at center. The East wide open. The Hawks make a lot of sense to me. You have Okongwu there. Clint Capella's leaving. They've had some interest in a big. They have the number 22 pick in this week's draft as well. So there's potential for the Celtics to move up to that spot. They also have a trade exception that fits Sam Hauser. So could Hauser be involved in a deal like this as well? The Celtics would have to get under the second apron to send 2 players out in a trade. But certainly possible in a bigger deal here. And again, this Holiday deal isn't done yet. It's not official until July 6th. So that thing could expand. There could be a number of trades that go on around the league here that combine to make all these money things work. So as I see this report here, in 1 second, I'm just trying to pull it up. I'm starting to think things are in the works here. And I think we knew leading up to draft night that the Celtics would try to get a lot of this work done while the activities at its highest here. A lot of teams trying to work together on a bunch of different stuff, particularly money. So yeah, this to me is real. This to me is something that could go down fast. I always look at the verbiage in these kind of reports. Serious trade suitor. They've emerged as a serious trade suitor. To me, that always says, I know something here. I can't confirm it yet. I can't go all the way with this, but something's happening here, and I want to put it out there. Not certain to happen, not going to happen necessarily in the near term here, but something's cooking. So let's look at the Hawks briefly before I sign off here. What they could offer, what money would need to move in a deal like this. And the Hawks have a lot of flexibility here. A bunch of trade exceptions, none big enough to take Porzingis in at $30 million, but numerous players here on some medium-sized deals, expirings that they could send over as well. And so, who's untouchable here? Trae Young's probably not part of this trade. Jalen Johnson, to me, is untouchable if I'm them. Let's see if they get silly, but to me, he's untouchable. I think you want to have two centers. So the Okongwu thing's interesting. I mean, if Okongwu comes back in this trade, you're doing backflips down the street. I love that player. I see someone in the chat here saying that there's a third team involved. And boom, there we go. Breaking news. The Celtics, Hawks, and Brooklyn Nets are finalizing a 3-team trade that sends Kristaps Porzingis and a second-round pick to the Hawks. Terrence Mann is coming back to Boston. Atlanta's number 22 pick is heading to the Nets. And George Niang, along with a second-rounder, heading to the Celtics. So let's throw this in the trade machine right now. Brooklyn comes through, and I'm going to text Amit, try to get him on here. But yeah, I'm breaking this down live as we talk, and we will do another live with the full crew here, but I might as well keep this conversation going. So yeah, let's build this trade real quick. So Niang is going to Boston. You have Porzingis going to Atlanta. The Nets again here is a facilitator. Let me pull up more details. Terrence Mann heading to the Nets. Mentioned number 22 pick in this week's draft heading to the Nets as well. So the Hawks do the facilitating with the draft pick there. That's a big plus for Boston. In turn, the Celtics just move George Niang into a roster spot that Porzingis vacates here. And a second rounder to the Celtics. Do they have any second rounders in this draft? Not that I can see. So their future seconds are Cleveland in 2027, a Cleveland in 2029, and then their own seconds in 2030 and 2031. Another Cleveland in 2031. Those are from the Karis LeVert trade. So here is our final trade. Let's see how this comes out. And again, 1 second going to Boston here. Don't know what second that is. George Niang, also a Lawrence native, by the way, I believe. Merrimack Valley, somewhere up there. Methuen. He's on expiring. Celtics save $22 million here by offsetting some of the salary to Brooklyn. Add that up with the $4.7 million that they saved from the Holiday deal yesterday, and they are out of the second apron. The Celtics can now trade multiple players. They can do all the different things that we're talking about here that you can't do as a second apron team. So this actually is wrong because I don't think this trade machine has the Holiday deal done. The Celtics are about $7 million out from the second apron. So what's that mean? You can probably keep Sam Hauser now. You can probably keep Anfernee Simons now if you would like to. And you can build this thing next year, for now, around Derek White, Peyton Pritchard, Simons in the backcourt, a Brown, Hauser, maybe bring in another wing as some depth there. Front court, Al Horford potentially coming back now as well. There's some wiggle room for that under the second apron. There's some wiggle room to sign Luke Cornett under the second apron. And I think this does increase the probability that Luke Cornett's back as well as Al Horford. And then you have your draft pick at number 28 and number 32 on Thursday. So the Celtics work might be done here as far as money goes. I think they'll probably pay a little bit of tax here. I think as we've seen reports that they're listening on some stuff. So yeah, we're going to talk more about this, but while I was live, we want to get some reaction to this. I'm talking right now with John and the crew, and I think we will be live in short order here, but that's my first reaction to this. Celtics dodge the second apron, save a ton on tax, and I'm going to go calculate that right now, but I'd have to imagine there's like 50 million, maybe even 100 million in tax coming off their bill with this deal. Niang comes in, stopgap wing for next year alongside Hauser. Maybe you want to move Hauser at this point and just let him play that role. You could move Niang for another player as salary. There's just so much more flexibility here now for the Celtics, who again are out of the second apron, are way down when it comes to the tax hit here, and are in a good position now to keep Luke Cornett, keep Al Horford, make a draft pick, keep Derek White, and keep Jaylen Brown, most importantly here. And this could be an effective team next year. So I was not in favor of trading Porzingis. The way this thing worked out, I think this is a pretty good deal here. So yeah, we're going to be live here again in short order, but just wanted to react to this while we had a moment here. So stay tuned for the next live. Turn on your notifications, subscribe, Celtics All Access, CLNS Media. And if you missed it, we talked quite a bit about Simons on this episode here as well. So glad I went live here at the time that I did. Shams Charania, in case you missed it, breaking news here. The Celtics have traded Kristaps Porzingis to Atlanta for George Niang and a second-round pick. The Nets get involved as a facilitator, taking on Terrence Mann and the Hawks' number 22 pick. So the Celtics do another salary dump here without giving up a pick. Just some expert maneuvering by this team. So Porzingis, Holiday out the door, George Niang, Anfernee Simons in. We'll have more reaction here on CLNS Media, but that has been the Garden Report for right now on CLNS Media.
No one's sneaking a vegan brownie by me, I'll tell you that.
Okay, you know what, John? We're going to do it.
You have to feel that way too, Bobby.
I have to feel that way. Let's
Yeah.
slide Al over and make Luke your first center.
Bobby, we gave you Luke hour early. We're not going to end this on a damn conversation about Luke